Hey everybody, Victor Pizzano with Charge Up. I want to thank you for joining us on another edition of Building the Champions Mindset through Charge Up, where we have the opportunity to bring in thought leaders from all perspectives, athletes, athletic directors, inspirational speakers, motivational speakers, people who can contribute and influence our lives in a positive direction. And that's the great thing, is there are resources all around us. It just takes a willingness for you to open your eyes and have perspective and see everything around you. And today I could not be more excited to have Damon West as a part of our series and an interview. Damon, from the outside looking in, he had everything going for him. He had a supportive family. He was involved in his hometown of Port Arthur, Texas. And true to Texas, he lived for the Friday Night Lights football. From Port Arthur, he earned a scholarship to play quarterback at North Texas State, where he played against some of the best teams in the nation and competed each and every weekend. Although that mask was beginning to crack slowly, and he knew that was happening, but it was on the inside, it took a devastating injury against Texas A&M to really begin to expose the truth. Following graduation, he still was able to contain the problems he had, and he went on to pursue some amazing opportunities, starting with a job in Washington, D.C., working for the U.S. Congress. From there, he went from the Hill and he started working for a Wall Street bank, a very prominent Wall Street bank. From the outside looking in, he had everything you can imagine. It was a storybook life. But life can fall apart, and we all know that. We all know that things can occur to us in the split of a second. So as a result of increased drug use, alcohol, hanging with the wrong crowd, life changed dramatically for Damon. And he went from that D1 athlete, the respected and trusted professional, to being found guilty of a first-degree felony and receiving a 65-year sentence. But committed to change, Damon made his time in prison one of transformation. He earned parole after just 7 years, and a new man emerged from the Mark Stiles unit in Beaumont, Texas, a man who dedicated his life to teach others not to take anything in life for granted. Today, Damon West travels the country with a sincere calling to serve by preaching his message of resiliency and hope to schools, churches, corporations, and some of the biggest NCAA sports programs in the nation. His story is one of addiction to servant leadership, pure servant leadership. It's earned him 2 best-selling books in the collaboration with Jon Gordon in The Coffee Bean, as well as one of my favorite books, and that's The Change Agent, which is a journal.
Victor.
This is an amazing thing, I thank you so much for being a part of the Champions Mindset series.
Well, thank you for having me today. Look, you read The Change Agent. You'll know the conversation I had with the parole person that was looking at my parole file to decide on me. And she asked me, she said, if you could be remembered for being anything in this life, she said, give it to me in just one word, go. And because I was a coffee bean, because my mindset was changed, because my life had been changed, because I surrendered inside that prison, I had her answer for her. The answer I gave her was useful. I just want to be useful, Victor, and I can be useful in that prison, or I could be useful out in the world finding those coffee beans. And Texas Department of Criminal Justice saw to it that I could be useful out in the free world and gave me parole. And so you gave me a chance today to be useful. That's all I ask for. I wake up every day, Victor, and I ask God the same 2 things I ask for him every day. I try to be careful what I ask God for, right? Because you don't want to make demands, or you don't want to seem like you're trying to go into a negotiation with God. But I get up every day and I ask God for the same 2 things. I say, hey, God, put in front of me what you need me to do today for you. And let me recognize it when I see it, because I don't want to miss that. And that's it. I don't ask God for anything else, man. So you were on my list today, Victor. Thank you for the opportunity, brother.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because the beginning part of your book, you talk about asking God for one thing. At the beginning, you talk about the negotiations you would have with God. Okay, here's the deal. If you do this, I'll do this. And I love the progression as you read the book and you realize the true meaning of that relationship with God is much different than a negotiation. It's an obligation by you to carry through. So
have your negotiations with him ever worked out well? Mine didn't.
Yeah, not so much. I've learned to just give it up to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where everything happens. One of the most talked about books that came out late last year was the one that Jon Gordon and yourself collaborated on, and that's The Coffee Bean. I want you to tell our viewers about a particular person in that book that changed your life, Mr. Jackson, and what he told you that created such an incredible resonating message.
Mr. Jackson, and here's the thing about it, Victor. I wish I could find Mr. Jackson. I don't know his real name. I don't know. He was a guy. A lot of these guys convert to Islam when they get into prison or jail. And he'd been to prison 4 or 5 times. They don't go by their government name. So I gave him the name Mr. Jackson just for the sake of telling the story, as opposed to me going around calling him Muhammad, because that's the name he went by. He went by the name Muhammad, and that was his. Think Cassius Clay became Muhammad Ali when he went into prison. So the same thing happens here. But I don't know his real name. I don't have his birth date or anything. I can't find him. But Mr. Jackson was one of those people in life. I believe that God, I'll speak from the I statements. I believe that in my life, God has never just reached down and said, I'm going to heal you, Damon. God's put people in my life. And those people have helped me out, getting from one station of life to the next. And when you're growing up, these people are often called coaches. They're called teachers. These are the people that guide, mold, and shape you. Mr. Jackson was certainly one of those. And I met him in Dallas County Jail. And it's funny when you think about it from a spiritual standpoint, a religious standpoint. Here's a Muslim guy, with this Muslim African-American guy on top of that, with this Christian white man inside of a prison where race is instead of a jail where race is the deciding factor on everything. Race is the king inside of the institution. But here he is. We couldn't be more opposite if we tried, but he's on my path. And because I was open, I was receptive to this person, this angel, to help guide me through this process. He gave me one of the key ingredients that got me through the entire prison process and guides me through life today. And that's whenever, he told me about prison being like a pot of boiling water. And he said, anything we put in that pot of boiling water is going to be changed by the heat and the pressure inside that pot. And he said, we put 3 things in that pot of boiling water and watch how they change: a carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. And he worked the progression. He said the carrot turns soft when he goes into prison. He goes in hard, but the water changes the carrot, beats him down. He gets beat, he gets robbed, he gets raped, he may get killed. He said, you can't be the carrot. You don't want to be the carrot. And he said the egg is a shell that protects him physically, but inside the egg is not okay because that soft liquid core, his heart becomes hardened. And he said, if your heart becomes hardened, well, you're incapable of giving and receiving love. And he said, if you're incapable of giving and receiving love, you have become institutionalized, and you will not come back as someone your parents recognize because your eggshell has swastikas tattooed all over it. And he asked me, but what happens when I put that coffee bean in the same pot of boiling water? And I had no idea. I didn't know what happened to a coffee bean, right? And so he told me. He said, if I put a coffee bean into that pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, now you have to change the name of the water to coffee. Because he said the coffee bean, the smallest of these 3 things, he said small like you, West, had the power to change the entire atmosphere inside that pot. He said everybody in life puts out energy, negative or positive. He said whatever kind of energy you put out, you attract back. It's called the law of attraction. He said, so if you want to walk around prison negative with a frown, you want to look hard, he said what you'll actually do is attract that same kind of inmate into your life. He said it could be a very dangerous, even deadly endeavor. He said, but Wes, if you walk around that prison with a smile on your face and you let those guys know they're not getting you, no matter what they do, they're not getting you. He said, you will change that prison from the inside out. And he said, the best part about it is the other coffee beans in prison, the other positive inmates will find you because of your energy. And the last thing Mr. Jackson told me before I left Dallas County Jail to go serve that life sentence in prison, he said, Wes, go out there and go be a coffee bean. And it was like a secret I got to take with me, Victor, that says, if Mr. Jackson shoot me straight, if he's telling me the truth, then the power in this situation is not even on the outside. It's not on the prison. It's not on the inmates. It's not the guards. They don't even really have power over me. The power is inside of me no matter where I go. And if he was telling me the truth, that means I wasn't just going to survive prison, that I could thrive inside of prison. And I think we all know how the story ended out. I became the coffee bean, and everybody else can too. And the great thing is right now, Victor, this time we're living in, there's never been a better time for this message. The entire world is in a pot of boiling water. But we have to remember that the power is inside of us. It's not on what's going on the outside.
I think it's a beautiful story of how within every obstacle, perspective allows you to see the opportunity. And through this story and the hundreds of thousands of people who who have read the book or heard you speak. It was, as you said, who would have known last year, September, October, as this book was being put out, that we would be in the situation we are. And these are one of those books that I promote to people. And I tell them, if you can't find the gratitude in life right now, if you can't find the message of something speaking to you, then when we get on the other side of this, it's been a waste of time. You have not taken advantage of something that's right in front of you. So, having heard you in Dallas and you spending time with us and listening to the premise of the story and what it meant to you, it was an incredible experience. And I read the book before, I read the book after, and the irony was, once the COVID began, I read it again. It's the kind of book you can read to remind yourself anytime what's important in life.
Absolutely.
I want to shift now to the change agent. You so aptly describe the meaning of servant leadership. And I'd like you to also share that with how you discovered the simplicity of its purpose in our life.
Yeah, this is a good question, and you're going to like this answer, being that you're an Aggie. So, servant leadership is something I learned from a guy named Joe Tatoris. And Joe Tatoris, well, you can find Joe. Joe passed away in August, man, my friend and mentor, and I miss Joe so much, man. Joe, you can find Joe every Monday night inside my prison in the chapel, in the Mark Stiles unit in Beaumont. He would be there fellowshipping with other inmates in there. He loved being around the marginalized in society, the cursed, the wicked, the sinners, incarcerated. He loved lifting those people up. He truly lived out that gospel, that Matthew 25:36. When I was in prison, you visited me. And Joe would go on these church retreats, these Acts retreats in prison, and he'd spend 4 days with the cursed, the wicked, the sinners, the incarcerated. No one wanted to be around us, man. Some of the people in there, their own families didn't want anything to do with them, but these guys did, these Acts brothers. And Joe was one of those Acts brothers. And when I got out of prison, Joe and I became close personal friends, and he became a mentor of mine. And Joe would always talk about servant leadership. And so I asked Joe to explain to me servant leadership. Joe, where'd you hear about servant leadership? So Joe's backstory. Joe graduated Texas A&M in 1970. He was in the Corps. Graduated the Corps in 1970. Moved back to Beaumont, Texas to start his family. Married his high school sweetheart, started his family. And in 1976 in Beaumont, he opened up his first little sandwich shop in Beaumont, Texas. Had 4 employees and 1 store. Small little sandwich shop. But today, Jason's Deli has over 300 stores. They're in over 30 states. They've got 12,000 employees at Jason's Deli today, right? Jason's Deli started with that one little store right down. I live in Needham, the town next to Beaumont. Right down the road in Gateway Shopping Center is where Joe started Jason's Deli in 1976. And so Joe told me servant leadership came to him. He said it was the early 90s, and he said the deli was doing well. He said it was growing the deli. He was doing everything he learned in business school at A&M. He was chasing down every dollar you can, because that's what he said they teach you in business school. The almighty dollar is king. We got to get as many of those as you can. He said, but he wasn't happy, and his business wasn't as good as it could be. And so he went to a symposium at A&M in 95, and the speaker that day was a guy named David Glass. And David Glass was the guy that Sam Walton picked to take over Walmart as CEO in the late 80s when Sam Walton stepped down. David Glass was the first CEO of Walmart. And so David Glass gave a presentation in 1995. I think it was March 2nd, 95, if I'm not mistaken on the date Joe said. He gave a presentation that day in College Station called Servant Leadership. And it blew Joe away. Because up until that point, Joe thought a servant was someone that did the menial tasks. They swept the floors. They carried the dishes. They carried the towel. That's what a servant does, right? And he said, but the leader is the guy that sits back and watches all of his servants work. And that's what Joe thought the relationship was between servant and leader. But then he found out from David Glass that he said, I had it all wrong, because a leader serves, man. He said, and the leader makes sure that his people have every opportunity to reach their goals in life. That a leader helps to raise others up, helps to take them to a different station in life. And he said, when we're helping other people, that's when we're at our best. That's what David Glass said that day. That's when we truly get to live out the human experience and fulfill our purpose in this life, in this world. So Joe went back to Beaumont. He changed the way Jason's Deli operated. He started giving his employees better benefits, better wages. He said in the beginning, on the front end of it, cost him more money, of course. But what happened next was revolutionary. And it's studied in business schools now all over the country. Because people go to Jason's Deli now. They don't go there to work for, the stepping stone in their life of a job. They go to work there for their careers. People go to Jason's Deli and they don't ever leave, man. And I go all over the country. Victor, I go to Jason's Delis in different parts of the country, but especially in Texas. And I'll ask for the general manager, and I'll say, hey, your longest employee that's worked here, you. How long is the longest employee that's worked here? Who is it? And the answer is always like the same. It's 18 years, 25 years, 35 years. I met a guy that has worked at Jason's Deli for 40 years now. 40 years at a restaurant, Victor. Unheard of, right? I mean, who does
Absolutely.
that? But Joe said all of his business buddies and CEO friends would ask him all the time, Joe, give us your secret, man. Where are you finding your people from, man? Where do you get your people from? And Joe would laugh, and he'd tell them the same place you get your people from, but it's what happens when they get on the inside. And that atmosphere, that culture of servant leadership is what Joe built an organization on, but it's what he lives his life by. Joe was the true servant leader. And he lived his life by that. That's why following in Joe's footsteps is so easy to do. It's not going to be easy to replicate, but it's easy to do because the guy lived it. He didn't measure his value in life. At the end of the day, it wasn't his measure of life wasn't by his business acumen or his accumulation of wealth. Hell, Joe had a private plane. He could go anywhere he wanted to. Joe measured each day with how much he could put back into the stream of life. And that's what being a servant leader is all about. And that's what all of us should strive to be. That's what I strive to be. I strive to find ways to serve other people. There's another story about that is that, we all have the ability, Victor, to reach one person. No person can reach everybody, right? There's not a megaphone big enough for everybody to reach for one person to reach everybody. But everybody has the ability to reach one person, especially with social media now. We can all find one person. Mr. Rogers, before he was Mr. Rogers, he was a Presbyterian minister. This is the children's television show guy, Mr.
Right.
Rogers. Back in the 60s, he was a Presbyterian minister, and he said he went to a church service one Sunday. And he said the substitute preacher that was giving the sermon that day, he sat there and listened to it. And at the end of the sermon, Mr. Rogers thought, that was the worst sermon I've ever heard. He said it was terrible. It was awful. He said it went against every rule that he knew of giving a good sermon. And just as he was about to turn to the lady next to him and tell her how terrible this guy was, he stopped. He bit his tongue because the woman next to him was in tears. She was in tears, and she turned to Mr. Rogers, and she said, that was the most beautiful sermon I've ever heard. She said it was the absolute right thing I needed to hear at the absolute right time. She said, I'll never forget where I was this day that I heard this sermon. And that's when Mr. Rogers realized about the power of everybody being able to communicate to at least one person. Everybody can reach at least one person. Even this guy that gave this awful sermon had the ability to impact one life that day. But he learned another very important lesson in life. He learned that while he was coming in judgment, she was coming in need. So many people, Victor, right now and in general, but especially right now, are coming in need. We have to find ways as servant leaders to fill that need in those people's lives. And the only way to do that is through positivity.
That's an amazing story, one that I didn't know. That's an amazing story. People like you're talking about with Jason's Deli and the success that it had, they were exercising servant leadership before it even became a niche term. It was who they were as a person. And I think it's a phenomenon that I'm so glad carried over and more attention was paid to it, because the most successful leaders today operate as a servant leader. And it's not difficult. It just takes a commitment, vulnerability, and being humble. But the rewards far outweigh any effort you have to put in.
You asked me about Dabo. One of the words I used to describe Dabo was vulnerable.
Right.
I saw Dabo. I was there in August 2019 and speaking to the team. He brings me in most years to speak to the team. And Dabo came up to the room after my presentation, and he was talking about something very personal. I won't go into the detail of what he was talking about, but it was something very personal, and it was emotional for Dabo. And Dabo started tearing up and crying. And we're standing there in front of this team, this defending national championship football team, right? These guys are the most elite athletes in college football. I'm standing next to Dabo as he's tearing up, and I watch the energy shift in this room. All the eyeballs in this room stopped looking around, and they zeroed in on Dabo. And the energy, you could feel the energy shift up front. Like, whoa, man, something is happening. And every guy in there was intense, and they're watching Dabo, and they're kind of get on their toes a little bit. And when Dabo called that meeting to an end, every one of those players jumped up and ran over there and hugged their head coach. They hugged Dabo. It was just a hug. And usually when these presentations end, they come up and hug me. They give the speaker 5. Then, hey, man, great presentation. No. They told me that stuff after they talked to Dabo to make sure Dabo was okay. Dabo's display of vulnerability in front of his men was something I have never seen another head coach do. And I thought to myself, there's other head coaches that win a bunch of national championships, and I wonder if one of those head coaches could do that in front of their players. You think that guy could do that? Man, but Dabo did. And Dabo brought his players closer to him with that vulnerability. He's so authentic, and that vulnerability is a strength. Yeah. Because when people see that you're a vulnerable man, they know that you are real, and they know they can be real with you too. And it knocks down a layer of protection that people put up, man. People want to put those walls up, and people associate vulnerability with weakness. It's not. It's one of the strongest things you can be as a leader is vulnerable, man. You don't have to be weak to be a vulnerable person.
What a way to connect with your players simply through that. So Building the Champions Mindset is a series with Charge Up that's specifically created for both high school and college student athletes. As somebody who's traveled across the country, and we've talked obviously about Clemson, but you have a long list of high schools and colleges that you've spoke to. What is your true message to each of them? I know that it varies, and I know that you adapt it to the program, but what's the core principle that you hope to walk away with that they understand?
I think that whenever you're talking to the high school and college players, there's a lot of overlapping message, and part of it's a warning about the dangers of drugs, the consequence of bad decisions, right? Because I was just like them. There's not a high school or college player that said, well, he doesn't know what it's like to have to get up and go to, to work out in the morning before class and then come out and practice and all that. So I was one of them. It's a currency we have that we can exchange, And so I know what it's like to be a student athlete. But the warning is that, a guy like me, let's call it like it is, a white middle-class guy in America that had everything going for him in life. If I could get hit with a life sentence for my first felony conviction ever, man, then it could happen to anybody, man. If drug addiction could take over my life with all the support and opportunity that I had going on in my life, if it could happen to me, man, nobody is safe, right? Because I had everything going for me and every advantage in the world. I had every advantage possible, Victor. And if it could happen to me, it can happen to any one of you. But the other message is, it's one part's a warning, the other part's a message of hope. Hope, you see in the movie Shawshank Redemption where, the main character says that hope is a dangerous thing. And
right.
But I think that, hope's only a dangerous thing when you put your hope in the wrong things. But the message of hope that I have for these athletes is that no matter what, man, you can persevere, that the human spirit is capable of so much more than what you think. That sometimes we find out what we're truly made of. I'd say usually we find out when our backs are against the wall, man, when we have to get up and get going. When, like Mr. Jackson said, you don't have to win all your fights, but you have to fight all your fights. And now you're getting up in that prison cell and you're deciding whether or not you want to leave the cell. Because if you leave the cell, you're probably going to have to get in a fight, but you got to go because you got to go eat. You got to go out there. You got to make an appearance. And but you get up and do it. You face your day, no matter what your day throws at you. And some days you're going to lose, Victor, but you get back up and keep going because you don't have to win all those battles, but you got to fight all those battles. But that's what I want to tell them. That look, man, life. You can't look at life through rose-colored glasses. Life is going to be tough. It's going to be hard. But that perspective, you use the word perspective a while ago. I tell people all the time, position determines perspectives. Where you've been and what you've seen and what you've done determines the world that you see today. And I just happen to be very fortunate that I have a healthy perspective in life after where I've been. But I was a receptive audience, a captive receptive audience to what God was trying to teach me. And I know what a bad day looks like now, Victor. And ever since November 16th, 2015, I haven't seen any bad days. I've seen some days that are better than others, brother, but I hadn't seen a bad day yet.
So I purposely saved this question for the end because it honestly put a smile on my face as I read it in the book. And it's in the second to last chapter of the book where you close by saying that, you had talked to your father about going back and Googling your name, and he tried to talk you out of it, but you still felt that conviction to do it. And once you did, you saw that page, and I love what you told your father. I'm going to quote it from the book. Give me a year, Dad. I said with conviction, I wasn't sure was even real. Give me a year to turn this thing around. By 2017, we'll see a completely different different page when you Google my name. So, Damon, it's May 2020, and I stopped after 4 pages of just going through Google. And I got to tell you something. Every single page talked about your transformation, talked about the inspiration, talked about the message that you are sharing to hundreds and thousands of people through every resource you can since your parole date of November 16th, 2015. Honestly, could you have imagined it that day you told your father?
Honestly, no. I mean, I don't know who I was trying to console more that day, him or me, with what was on that page of Google. It was awful. I mean, it was, you could find that stuff on Google still, but you got to go really far back. Like you said, you've got to dig deeper now to find it. And so I've replaced the negative stories with the positive ones. I had a lot of help along the way. I tell people all the time, I didn't get here on my own, man. God and has put a lot of people in my life that have given me these things that I call God things. Victor, I have been so blessed in this life. I have hit so many green lights in a row. I mean, not many people coming out of prison get to experience life the way I experience it. And not many people at all, even not coming out of prison, get to experience a life like this of service and the magnitude of this service. But I think it's contingent upon one thing, and it's my spiritual growth. And my spiritual growth, my serenity, this comes straight from the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. My serenity, my sobriety is contingent upon the maintenance of my spiritual condition each day. So that means each day I have to get up and I have to say the same thing to God. I gotta get my day. I've got to surrender to God every single morning. That's the one step of the 12 steps in AA that I work. The one step I got to work every day is that first step. That first step that says I'm powerless over drugs and alcohol and that my life had become unmanageable. That's a two-part step. The first part talks about being powerless. The second part says that my life is unmanageable. You would not believe how many people I ran into in prison, how many inmates that, I'd come back from these meetings, these AA meetings, and talk to these guys about, what I just experienced in the meeting. And these guys were like, yeah, I can understand not being, being powerless, but I don't think my life is unmanageable. And I'm like, dude, you're wearing a white uniform that the state of Texas gave you. So you're waiting for someone to tell you when you can eat, sleep, poop, or pee, take a shower. That's the height of unmanageability, But we don't always get to see the unmanageability because we have these delusions. And so to live my life, that spiritual life like that, I've got 4 spiritual principles that I plug in when I want to make a decision. And the 4 spiritual principles, they can be found in the Bible. They can be found in most religious books. And it's unselfish, honest, pure, and loving. And I've got to ask myself, it's a matrix, Victor. I got to ask myself, Damon, is what you're about to do, is it unselfish? Is it honest? Is it pure? Is it loving? And if it's not those things, then I know what it is because I've lived it. It's not one of those things. It's over here on the other side. It's selfish. It's self-seeking. It's self-want. It's self-desire. And it's that big one, that's self-delusion, man. And self-delusion is the one that gets us, man. That's when you believe you're on crack. I always say that half of my head is a manure factory. The other half buys manure, So and that's when you believe you're on crack, right? So, but you've got to get outside of that. And when you can find purity in your life and all your motives become pure, and this is a hard thing, Victor. I can't do this 100% to perfection. I don't. I stumble, I fall, I mess it up all the time. But to get my life where it is now, it takes a constant surrender. And for those Google pages to remain like that, I have to always remember that I'm here to play the role God has chosen me to play. And this is God's story, not Damon's story. The minute it becomes Damon's story, we got some problems, The last time I drove the car, Victor, I parked it inside of a maximum security prison. So I try not to drive anymore today. I try to just be a passenger of the road in life and let God drive that car. And God is driving that Google car right now. And that Google car is going to be fine with good stories as long as I continue to let God drive that car.
Yeah, where I learned your authenticity and where I learned your passion was you came to our summit for Power of Positive Leadership in October, and all of us were blown away at the fact that not only were we going to have the opportunity to learn from Jon Gordon, but to have you there because we didn't know that. And it was an incredible experience to have you there. But where I learned your authenticity is you stayed with us for 2 days and you were at our table and you participated in these things and you would talk to other people and you would walk around. And I kept thinking to myself, here's somebody who I know is so busy, has so many things that they've got to accomplish, but they realized that the most important moment was now. And you were so genuine in your approach, meeting people and shaking hands. And it inspired me. It absolutely inspired me. And that's why having you on today, I'm humbled and I'm blessed. It's just another story that I can pass on about you when I recommend either of your books. So I want to sincerely thank you on behalf of Charge Up. Thank you for taking your time today to share an extremely powerful message. Like I said, I'm humble, Damon.
I'm humbled by your words. And, that day, that Power of Positive Leadership seminar that Jon was putting on, I was so excited to be there. And you're right. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff. I'm busy and it takes me away from other things. But it was so great to be there, first and foremost, because I got to serve Jon Gordon. I got to serve Jon and bring something different to Jon's thing and give Jon the most valuable thing that any of us have is our time, right? I got to give Jon some of my time because Jon has done so much for me. Outside of Dabo, Jon's done more for me than any other person on the planet. So it was an honor to first be there to serve Jon and then to meet all of y'all. I mean, it's just, that energy that was in that room is contagious. So I got out of that room the same thing you got out of that room, man. You got the positive charge and I got the positive charge. It's like Jackson said, you're either going to infect those around you, you're going to affect those around you. A lot of positive effect was going on that day, man. So thank you, Victor. I'm glad that you came up and introduced yourself. I'm glad that you reached out to me. I tell people all the time, the only question you know the answer to is the one you do not ask. Because if you don't ask the question, it's a guaranteed no every time. So always ask, man. Thank you for having me on the show today.
I sincerely appreciate it. I wish you the best of luck in the future. And just show them that logo on that shirt right there you got on.
Just talk to the A&M athletic department. Every coach, the AD, Ross Bjork, all those guys, they were all on the call. A couple hundred people from the A&M athletic department. They wanted to know about the coffee bean and how it can apply to them right now. And I gave it to them, man. Both barrels of the coffee bean.
From the class of 91, gig them. And people, if you are not following Damon West on social media, I urge you, go do it. Go to the website. There are so many things you can learn, and the posts that he put are so heartfelt, real. They're applicable. Please, I'm going to post them underneath. You're going to see them also go across this interview. But please go follow him. Damon, I hope you have a wonderful day. I sincerely thank you. And friends, charge up.
Awesome, Victor. Thank you.